Hello, BookTube. We are doing a whole bunch of BookTube reading events starting this summer. A whole bunch in June, a whole bunch in July, a whole bunch in August, and then cap all things off in September. Uh, and that, for me, is wonderful. I realize, as I've said in a couple of other videos today, I realize that that presents just a pitiless choice that some of you have to make. A lot of you do not have a lot of reading time. You still stick at it because you're diehard readers, but you've got to pick and choose what you're going to do. You can't sign up for every BookTube event. And I understand that completely. I can. I can, in fact, sign up, not for every BookTube event, but certainly for the ones that interest me. Especially the ones where I'm a co-host, which is quite a few. You wouldn't think that would be true, because I'm largely persona non grata in BookTube, but nevertheless, I am the co-host of quite a few BookTube events, and one of them is Dune in June, a new BookTube event that's all about Frank Herbert's novel Dune, a great science fiction novel, Dune. Now, Dune is a great science fiction novel, but it's also, for a lot of people, an intimidating science fiction novel, not only because of its complex plot and premises and long, deep backstory, but also because of its status in the science fiction world. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting a list of someone saying this is the greatest science fiction novel of them all. I, myself, have that opinion. But for someone who's never read it, and maybe who hasn't read much science fiction, you're looking at it thinking, oh my God, well, that is intimidating. I'm not ready for that. And that is not true. It takes very little preparation to be ready for this book. And boy, oh boy, will you get a lot out of it. I've given a little bit of that preparation myself. I did a primer video for Dune that doesn't spoil the novel. It doesn't walk you into the book at all. Instead, we just talk about the world from which this novel springs. In my Dune primer video, which a lot of you have written to me and said you really enjoyed it, that's good. That hit the right spot for the audience that I wanted. In that video, I described to you the world that drops you off at the first chapter of this book. Nothing beyond that. Just that. What you need to know to drop you off at the first chapter of this book. And I made a second primer video about the cast that you will meet as you start reading this book. Some of the cast. Not all of them, but some of them. The major players in the cast. Also, to demystify things. Also, so that you have an idea of who you should be paying attention to in this story as it starts. And then, to start off Dune in June, I did a walkthrough of the first section of this book. The first little section. It's not called a chapter. Dune doesn't have chapters. It has big sections. This first week, we're doing the section called Dune. Then in the second week of June, we're doing the section called Muad'Dib. Then in the third week of June, we'll do the section called The Prophet, and that will leave us with a week for the appendices to the book and also discussions of the various video representations of the book. That's a fun breakdown. It's a large amount of reading. Those sections are long, but they are broken up into little things that some other author would have called chapters. And that's what I'm kind of thinking of them as. We had a look at chapter number 1 of Dune. I thought today for Dune in June, I don't know how often I'll do this or if I'll do this regularly. I thought we'd look at chapter number 2. I figure if you're doing Dune in June, you've already read this. And maybe if you're thinking about Dune in June, you're still a little worried about it, still a little intimidated by this thing that's been staring at you on your shelf. So let's go through chapter number 2 just a bit and talk about it just a bit. In chapter number 1, we meet the Lady Jessica, the consort, but not the wife, of Duke Leto Atreides, who's been ordered by the Emperor to move his household from the planet Caladan to the planet Dune, which has been ruled for a long time by House Harkonnen, House Atreides' deadly enemies, and the bad guys of this series. The Harkonnens have been told by the Emperor to evacuate the planet. I, the Emperor, am giving this fiefdom to Duke Leto Atreides. It's not yours anymore, so you have to leave. That's a sore spot, to put it mildly. The Harkonnens have been rendered extremely wealthy by the planet Dune because it's the only source of the spice melange anywhere in this entire sprawling intergalactic community. It only exists one place, can't be manufactured in a laboratory, and it's essential for everything. So the Harkonnens have become extremely wealthy by owning the fiefdom to Dune, and now they've been ordered to give it up. And Duke Leto has been ordered to move in. Lady Jessica is his lady. She is the love of his life. She is the mother of his son Paul, and she is a member of the Bene Gesserit, somewhat mysterious all-female society that is involved primarily in, as young Paul intuits in that first chapter, politics. They're mainly engaged in politics. Outwardly, that is their purpose. They are political advisors to a great number of houses, including the emperor himself. Privately, they have another goal, which is to develop bloodlines, to shape the breeding lines of various royal and more major and minor houses in order to produce a figure that they are sure exists. They're sure they can produce a figure called the Kwisatz Haderach, a man with the enhanced mental and sensory powers of all the Bene Gesserit women. I don't know that Frank Herbert is ever clear on why the Bene Gesserit think this is possible, or how long they've had this thought in their minds and thought that it was possible, or why they would want it to happen, even if it is possible. I don't think he ever makes that clear. It's just a given. We're supposed to assume the Bene Gesserit are trying to do this. To the extent that Jessica was ordered by her sisterhood to control her bodily functions and give Duke Leto a daughter. She didn't do it. She gave him a son instead. She defied the sisterhood to do that. But that was the reason. And the reason that the sisterhood told her to do that is not because they like little girls instead of little boys. It's because they want the daughter for mating purposes in pursuit of the Kwisatz Haderach. In that first chapter, Paul is tested by the Reverend Mother with the Gom Jabbar. Horrifying test that's described wonderfully by Frank Herbert, to see whether or not he's human, to see whether or not he can control himself, and control his baser emotions. And that's it. That's the first chapter. In the second chapter, you expect that you're going to get the fallout from that, but you don't. Instead, we move locations to a planet called Gedi Prime, where we meet a group of people who would certainly fail the Gom Jabbar. We meet the bad guys. Some of the bad guys. We meet the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, the head of House Harkonnen, the person who has been ordered to evacuate Dune. He's not on Dune in this chapter. He's on his homeworld of Gedi Prime. But he's been told that he has to move his troops out. They are to evacuate the planet. The other two people in the room are the Baron's nephew, Feyd-Rautha, who is young and sleek. He doesn't look anything. The Baron is, we're told, grotesquely fat. So much so that he needs an anti-gravity suspensor belt just to help him walk around. He's enormously fat. Feyd-Rautha is not. Feyd-Rautha is a dreamboat. He's young and lethal and impatient and boorish and psychotic. And there's also the Baron's mentat. Now, in a couple of my primer videos, I described what mentats are. They stem from an event in Dune prehistory, event that Frank Herbert never describes, called the Butlerian Jihad, where advanced computational and AI machinery, Frank Herbert doesn't use the term, he was 70 years ahead of his time, but he doesn't use the term AI, but that's what he means. A machine that thinks like a human. They are forbidden. They're completely wiped out. Again, Frank Herbert does not describe the events of the Butlerian Jihad in the book. And he also doesn't tell us why, all these centuries later, the Imperium and the great houses would care, why they would still follow the Butlerian Jihad. This is not a religious society. So, despite the term jihad, there's no compulsion on anyone to do this. He doesn't describe why it's still in effect, but it is still in effect. And because it's still in effect, and because obviously if you're in a super sophisticated science fiction universe, you're going to need computers, well, you have to get around that. And the way you get around that is with humans trained to be computers. Those are called mentats. Although, here in this chapter, we meet Baron Harkonnen's mentat, Peter, or Piter, however you want to pronounce it. I'm going to call it Peter. Who's thin and ferrety and broken. He's a broken mentat because he's a psychotic. As Baron Harkonnen says in this chapter, he commits violence and atrocity because he has to advance his house and advance his needs. But Peter, he thinks, likes it. So, in other words, I want to underscore the point that I've already made. I'll make it again when we meet the other mentat in this story. The two mentats that we see in Dune are not good mentats. Not in terms of good and evil, but neither one of them is a mentat functioning properly. As silly as that sounds to say. It's in a way necessary to talk about them like they were machines, because they were meant to be machines. Peter is not functioning properly. He's a psychotic. And the other mentat that we're going to meet is not functioning properly because he's very old. He's past his prime. He makes big mistakes that a mentat should not make. And this chapter is just a discussion. between those three. There's nothing like the Gom Jabbar. There's no action in this chapter. It's just these three talking in front of an enormous, detailed globe of the planet Dune, of the planet Arrakis, which is all sand. It's just ripples of caramel sand, except for tiny ice caps. But that's it. Other than that, no. We never learn anything about, in the book, we never learn anything about those ice caps. It is theoretically possible for you to be on the planet Dune in a parka, surrounded on all sides by snow as far as you can see. Snow and ice as far as you can see. Are there predators up there? Do people live up there? You would think they would. But we never learn anything about that in this book. Instead, we're concerned with all of the other latitudes, with just endless oceans of sand, with outcroppings here and there where cities can be made. And we get the other side of the coin of that order of House Atreides to move to Dune. We get the underside of it. We get the dark side of it. We are told the plans of the villain. No spoiling here. In chapter number 2, we are told everything that Baron Harkonnen is planning. He is not planning on being done with Dune, any more than the Emperor is seriously planning on him being done with Dune. This is a trap. As I've been saying in a couple of these Dune primer videos, this is a trap for Duke Leto. And he knows he's walking into one. There's no explanation that makes sense otherwise. Why would the Emperor do this? The Emperor is jealous of Duke Leto and doesn't trust him. Obviously, he is ordering him to Dune to trap him. The Harkonnens are not going to leave. They're going to leave a booby-trapped planet. But it's worse than that. And the Baron rehearses. He has Peter, the Mentat, rehearse the plan. The trap itself. Turns out that it's Peter's idea. He taunts the Baron by saying that it's not the Baron's idea. The Baron isn't clever enough to come up with that idea. Right away, we see this is not a healthy relationship. Feyd-Rautha thinks it himself in this chapter. Every time, my father can't talk to his Mentat without arguing with him. It's just a waste of my time. It's a weird relationship. It doesn't seem like it could possibly last for any amount of time. In fact, we intrude into the Baron's thoughts in this chapter, and he says, I'm going to have to kill this guy soon. He's almost outlived his usefulness, and Peter knows that. But he knows that he is still useful. And he describes the plot for Feyd-Rautha. In this chapter, they take Feyd-Rautha into their confidences, which is that they have suborned a member of Duke Leto's household. And they tell us, right here in chapter 2, they tell us who the member is, Dr. Yueh, who was conditioned. He has Imperial Suk conditioning that is supposed to be unbreakable, that would make it impossible for an enemy to turn him against the people he's treating. Kind of a mental neural version of the Hippocratic Oath. The Baron has found a way. Feyd-Rautha is astonished to learn this in this chapter. He is under the impression, until this moment, that Suk conditioning is unbreakable. The Baron says, we found a way, but he doesn't elaborate on what it is. Feyd-Rautha is told, and the reader is told, that Dr. Yueh is the traitor in the Atreides household. So we know this going into the book. It's not like the traitor's reveal 10 chapters from now is going to be a big deal, something the reader didn't know about. Yeah, we know it right away. Herbert is too confident a storyteller to put a lot of weight on hokey reveals like that. You get plenty of surprise reveals in the course of this book. I won't be spoiling any of them. But that's not one of them. You know right away, literally chapter 2, who the traitor is. And you know the larger plot behind it because the Baron and Peter, his Mentat, spell it out for Feyd-Rautha, which is not just that Dr. Yueh is going to betray the family at a crucial moment once they get to Dune and bring about their downfall, but that they will also be defeated on the battlefield by the forces of House Harkonnen, supplemented by 2 legions of the Emperor's Imperial Sardaukar stormtroopers, disguised as Harkonnen soldiers. The Baron just comes right out and says this plan. The Emperor is behind his goal to destroy House Atreides. The Emperor is going to help him clandestinely. It can't get out. The great houses of the Imperium would band together and take the Emperor down if they thought that he was going to use his Sardaukar against any one of them individually. It's their stalking nightmare, that he could pick them off one by sending in his horde of trained killers. They can't know. It has to be clandestine. But Duke Leto, Baron Harkonnen wants him to know. Doesn't want him just to be executed by Dr. Yueh or anybody else. He wants him to know, I have encompassed your doom. And we get all of that in this chapter, which not only gives us a lot of that, I think that the revelation of not only the plot, the betrayal of Dr. Ewell, but also the hidden plot of Sardaukar soldiers helping the House Harkonnen. I think that revealing all of that in chapter 2 actually heightens the tension rather than deflates it. I think that's a wonderful narrative gimmick to do. Not only that, but the chapter also gives us a sense of who these people are and how small they are. Aside maybe from Feyd-Rautha, although he's not a nice guy. But he is right. I think the reader is sympathizing with him when they see the Baron squabbling with his Mentat. It's also petty and unseemly. We've had very little glimpse of the Atreides yet. We're going to get that. That's coming up right away. But we know right away that these are not admirable people. These are not admirable characters at all. We, of course, would know that anyway because the Baron is plotting the downfall of his enemy purely through treachery. That's not honorable anyway. And it turns out in this chapter we learn that the Baron sent a note to Duke Leto asking for an in-person meeting. What that was supposed to be, I have no idea. Because the Baron's plans obviously are not... The Duke turns him down. He sends a note, just calling him Harkonnen, not Baron Harkonnen or anything like that, just Harkonnen, and says, I've known your treachery many, many times. Everybody knows that. I'm not going to meet you. This is Conley. This is a fight, a vengeance fight to the death. I've heard some people over the decades say that it was Duke Atreides spurning that offer of a meeting that led to this plan. That's obviously not true. The plan has long, long standing and is at least as much supported by the Emperor as it is dreamt up by a damaged Mentat. So, regardless of whether Duke Leto ever met with Baron Harkonnen, the plan would still have gone forward. It might have been that the Baron wanted to taunt him a little at that meeting. Not revealing the plan, but taunting him just a little, maybe savor his bravura, maybe savor his assurance that he can get out of any trap, maybe that. But anyway, it doesn't happen. So we haven't met this figure yet, this Duke Leto. We haven't met any of his staff. We haven't met anybody aside from Jessica, the Reverend Mother, young Paul, and now the bad guys. I myself think that there is a very adept storytelling at play here in keeping these character introductions so controlled at the beginning. 3 characters in chapter 1, 3 characters in chapter 2. I think it's a good way to do this. It's a gentle way to work your way into what is going to be an epic story. So that is chapter 2 of Dune. I don't know if I'll do this for every chapter. I love talking about this book. And I never actually have done a chapter-by-chapter breakdown. But I think if I did that, my breakdowns would extend well beyond the length of Dune and June. Dune and June is one of 4 booktube events that I'm talking about today, and it's one of the 2 that is only the month of June. Dune and June on the Range are only the month of June. I don't know that I could do a chapter-by-chapter breakdown every day and get us done in time, but that we are inching closer and closer into the story. We did not go straight to the fallout from the first chapter. Instead, we move to Giedi Prime. We move to the bad guys and get introduced to them. So anyway, that is chapter 2 of Dune. I would love to know if you are reading along with Dune, if you are engaged in Dune in June. I'd love to hear about it. Love to hear what you're thinking about this book. I'm going to wrap this up for now, but feel free to email me. I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.